Welcome back, everyone. The Beijing Summit and 9th Ministerial Conference of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, was held in Beijing. The event started on Wednesday, 4th of September, and ends today, Friday, 6th of September. The heads of state, government, and delegation of China and 53 African countries, and chairperson of the African Union Commission and their ministers of foreign affairs and of economic cooperation attended that summit and ministerial conference, respectively. FOCAC was created to improve cooperation between China and African states and signaled China's growing strategic initiative in Africa. So tonight, let's discuss the key takeaways from that conference, with particular focus on the opportunities for Nigeria. And joining me for this conversation is Ambassador Elajah Onyeagba. He's a former Nigerian ambassador to Burundi. Good evening to you, Ambassador. Thank you so much for joining us on Politics Tonight. Welcome.
A very good evening to you. It's my pleasure having me in your studio once again.
Right, so it's the 24th year of the inception of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, which is seen as the most comprehensive platform that promotes the China-Africa relationship. For you, has it really served its purpose? And I'm specifically asking because while economic globalization has provided new opportunities for China-Africa cooperation, would you say there is active promotion on the African side, and is there efficient execution on the Chinese side?
Thank you very much for this conversation, because I believe that Africa leaders need to do a lot more than they are doing with China, and that's my personal opinion. But that being said, FOCAC was established in the year 2000. That's about 24 years ago. And it usually holds every 3 years. And that allows for improved political cooperation between African countries and China. That allows for economic cooperation, and that allows for cultural exchange between China and African countries. The last took place in 2001 in Dakar, with an interministerial. So clearly, in my view, I think that China is very clear on what it wants from Africa. China is everywhere. And I just want to see a lot much more improved negotiation skills on the part of African leaders as well. Because what has happened over the years is that I believe that, I can say that there has been improved trade relations, economic relations between China and Africa. But I think that African leaders can get a little bit more. I'd like to see improvements in areas like capacity development. I'd like to see improved relations with respect to technology transfer. Because quite a lot of Chinese companies are here in Africa, and they are doing quite a lot within the continent. They're helping us provide a lot in infrastructural development, construction of bridges, roads, and that of seaports and even airports in some instances. But I also would like to see a much better engagement, a situation where we will find Chinese companies come to Nigeria and do a lot more than they are doing right now. Most Chinese companies, when you go to their site, you find out that they are not just bringing funding into the country or technology, they're also bringing labor. So somehow we just have an invasion of Chinese within the continent. And I believe that exchanges and platforms like this provides for some of those issues to be addressed. And I'm particularly happy with the way the president had actually traveled on this mission with a lot of state governors, because what has happened over the years is that subnationals are also engaging Chinese companies in all kinds of business transactions. The latest, which brought a maximum embarrassment to the image of Nigeria, is a case of Ogun State and Zhangfu, company, that entered into a contract. And of course, the federal government may not have been aware of this transaction, but what has happened is that, they have gotten a French court ruled that they can go ahead and seize 3 Nigerian jets, and clearly what gave rise to this was that there had been trade treaties, MOUs that had been established between China and Nigeria that they relied upon, to call for arbitration to get to, French courts to give them that judgment. So there has to, I'm particularly happy because what has happened is that between the federal government and its subnationals, there should be some improved cooperation. Whatever agreement that any state within the country is engaging federal government on, that agreement should be, sorry, is engaging the government of China or any Chinese company. That information must be out there for the federal government to be aware of. That way, everyone is carried along, and that's why I'm particularly happy, because a lot of state governors accompanied the president on this trip, and I think that that's quite commendable.
Right.
Again, there was also, on the sidelines of...
Please go ahead.
Please go ahead. I'm also saying that on the sidelines of that engagement, there was also an ECOWAS meeting, of course, where the president was talking about the need for African leaders to, jettison protectionism and then embrace, multilateralism. The world we live in today, every country runs an open economy. You can't just survive having, closing your borders. So while trying to encourage us to, there's always the challenge of, the fear that comes with the fact that, there's this thinking that if you open up your economy and, you get invaded by the Chinese or by some other external forces, you begin to, lose some of the things you have within your system. But of course, I'm pretty much happy that the president talked about it, because we live in a globalized society.
Right. So we'll come back to the president's speech in a moment. Ambassador, we'll come back to the president's speech in a moment. But when you heard or listened to President Xi Jinping's speech, what came to your mind? Because this year's FOCAC theme centered on a shared future between China and Africa. But you heard the president and other Chinese stakeholders strongly emphasize the two regions' shared past, especially when it comes to overcoming Western colonialism. What's your general assessment of the president's speech? That's President Xi Jinping's now. Because at early FOCACs, the belief is that China largely shaped the agenda and presented it to African delegations. And some say that is no longer the case, because African negotiators have become increasingly effective in asserting their priorities. Was it evident in that speech?
It is, and I totally, I listened to the speech, and I think that it's very clear that a lot more work needs to be done on the part of Africa, and I also believe that there will be improvements going forward, because negotiators, within the continent must do a lot, beyond what they are doing now to ensure that they don't just, get shortchanged in that process. The whole idea is that China is world power. And they are here to stay. And they've also assisted quite a lot of African countries, that must be said. But again, there are quite a lot of African countries that are having issues with China. There are some that they have gone to take over their airports. There are some that they've, done all manner of things as well. I mean, a country like Nigeria, giant of Africa, just got its plane seized. In France, just on the account of a court judgment, on an engagement between the state government and China. So that actually shows that there are issues that must be ironed out. That shows that there are things that must be straightened out. That shows that there are things that I believe that, engagements of this nature will provide a better platform for a better engagement. And I think that what is going on is probably a step in the right direction to ensure that Africa gets a fair deal from this engagement.
So, Ambassador, broadly speaking now, what's your assessment of President Tinubu's speech at the forum? We heard him talk about $280 billion economic trade partnership growth between Africa and China, and he calls it exponential.
Yes, I think the president is right, absolutely. Quite a lot. I don't know of any country that trades more with Nigeria than China. I actually don't know of any continent that trades, of any country that trades more with the continent than China. So clearly there's a lot that is going on within the country, between the countries, in Africa and China. And I believe that, President's speech also brought to the fore the need for a lot of African leaders and for a lot of, those involved in the negotiation to do a lot more, because, Africa is a big market. Africa has got a huge population as well. So whatever you're doing and you're not looking at Africa, then you're actually not serious about it. So clearly I believe that speech, spoke to the heart of the real issues, which is the fact that we've got the market here, which is, speaking to the fact that, what we must do must be to cooperate economically. What we must do must be to find a better handshake in such a way that there is mutual respect between China and African countries as we go on, on this platform that has been provided by FOCAC. And most importantly, again, is that if you look at what has been happening, within several African countries, Nigeria inclusive, this platform, this forum provides a better opportunity to dig deeper and see how that can be improved upon. And it's not just China. Quite a lot of other big countries and economic powers have got similar initiatives. But I believe that of China has done a lot for Africa, and all we need to do is to try and improve on it, try and correct some of the anomalies, try and resolve some of the issues that has come as a result of misunderstanding or whatever that is going on as far as this Chinese...
Ambassador, how do we correct these anomalies? Because, I mean, let's break it down, because that's the basis of this conversation. And you've consistently said Africa needs to do more. For those who say, yes, this strategic agreement and shared vision of growth has been mutually beneficial. Some say the FOCAC mechanism is not flawless. There exist issues that are difficult to coordinate and deal with. If the forum hopes to make more achievements in cooperation and better accommodate the development demands of African countries, the initiative and activeness should be given full play. Do you agree that as a continent, Africa is still weak in the formulation of national or regional development plans?
Yes, we are weak. And that's why I keep saying that a lot of work needs to be done on the part of African leaders. Make no mistake about this. China is very clear on of what the agenda for Africa is. And all we need to do as Africans is to sit down and also be very clear what our expectations and the processes for going about them. I think there needs to be increased and improved transparency in these relations. There has to be a lot more work that should be done to ensure that the relations and the cooperation witnesses improved transparency, and it's not too much to ask for, And I believe that some of these, challenges that we are having, every 3 years, our ministers, both foreign affairs and that of economic and budget and all of that, sit together either in China or in any African country to sit down and review the platform, review this cooperation, review the mechanism, review the implementation. So I am of the view that a lot of work has to be done because, beyond what happened to Nigeria, a couple of other African countries have had similar issues and complaints about what is going on between them and China. But that being said, there is no system that is without error. There is no system that is perfect. There will always be room for improvements. And of course, anytime we have these engagements, it calls for improved transparency, it calls for looking at areas that there are issues and try to find ways to strengthen them. Because I believe that the relations between China and Africa is there for the long haul. Quite a lot is going on within the continent as a result of these relations. And I'm saying, for example, if Chinese companies come here to Nigeria to do stuff, to do businesses, they should be compelled to use our labor. This is a country that have got, over 200 million people. Why do we have Chinese coming from China and they are bringing laborers to come to the country? They come with their technology, they come with their funding, they also come with their labor. That shouldn't be the case. And there must also be some kind of, mechanism that must be put in place to transfer technology to us so that it's not just the fact that they have come with the money. And this also comes in form of loans. We will repay the loan, and at the end of the day, the money goes back to China. They brought their laborers here to come and do the work that would have hitherto done. So that's where I'm saying that beyond the benefits that have come to Africa, to Nigeria, as a result of this cooperation, a lot can be done. China needs they need our raw materials. They need some of the things that we're doing in the country. They need to find outlets for investments, for funding of their companies, of some of the things that they are manufacturing in China, and Africa provides a fertile ground for that. But our African leaders must stand up and be a little bit much more pushful and be clear on what they want and the strategy for which they want to exhibit some of those kind of things. And I believe that this forum provides an avenue for that, and we'll get there with time.
All right. Another takeaway from that forum is that Nigeria and China agreed to encourage flexible and diverse regional monetary and financial cooperation, such as local currency swaps to promote bilateral trade. What are the opportunities for Nigeria?
The opportunities are quite enormous because, remember, the challenge has always been, if you look at the way we trade, we have to convert our local currency to dollar, and then from dollar we convert to to whatever China local currency in China, and that is also putting pressure on our foreign exchange. Some time ago in the past, we had a renminbi kind of transaction that allowed a direct swap between our local currency and the Chinese currency. And that's what I believe that we can find ways and means of doing, so that we can always find this swap arrangement that can work better between Nigerian traders and the Chinese traders. That way, we will not have a middle currency that we will all have to do the conversion. There's already increased pressure on dollar from the importation of petroleum products, from all manner of trade that we do in the country. If our operators, between the two countries can sit down and find a mechanism of ensuring that we can have that trade without passing through another country's currency. If we can have that swap, then that would make a lot of sense, because what it will mean is that it becomes easier for people to trade with their local currencies. It means that Nigerian traders can actually use their naira that they have in their accounts and have some kind of swap between the Chinese counterparts, and then trade can happen. So these are some of the benefits that we can get from trying to trying to engage further and find ways of getting a better deal in the engagement for Nigeria. And I think that this is a step in the right direction. And like I said, it takes time. It's engagement, it's negotiation. We sit on the table, look at ways and means of ensuring that we get the best for our people in this engagement.
All right, Ambassador, let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll take a look at other takeaways from that forum. Please stay with us, everyone.
Stay ahead with the biggest news stories. Go beyond the news headlines. Experience impactful investigations. Enjoy resourceful news coverage in real time. TVC News at 7 and TVC News at 10 p.m. Live every day on this channel. TVC News. First with breaking news. Experience information and entertainment like never before as TVC Breakfast takes your weekends to a whole new level. Introducing TVC Breakfast Weekend Edition, your ultimate source of thrilling sports updates, insightful political analysis, and captivating entertainment news. Stay in the know with what's trending, catch up with the latest in sports, and immerse yourself in the latest buzz from the world of music and movies. Your weekends are no longer just days off, but moments packed with knowledge, excitement, and enjoyment. TVC Breakfast Weekend Edition, only on TVC News.
Doubt and fear doesn't occur at the canvas, it shows in the canvas. It shows the conation of raw earthen material slabbed, stroked, and molded at a pace provided by the doubt and fear. Every move way in the struggle of one to the other, merging the past to the present, brushstrokes of colors seen but not known. For when the wailing stops, the pieces settle down in abject beauty erected for a century of a century. Speaking, advocating, protesting as the arts are meant to be.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us. Tonight, our focus is on China's Africa agenda and its opportunities for Nigeria. And I've been speaking with Ambassador Elajah Onyeagba. He's the former Nigerian ambassador to Burundi. Ambassador, thanks a lot for staying with us on Politics Tonight. You've maintained that this relationship between China and Africa has to go beyond funding. And I also read about this latest commitment to support Nigeria in improving its military technology, equipment, intelligence, and other capabilities. I'm asking you this question because there's been this conversation about whether or not we need foreign support in tackling banditry and terrorism, especially in enhancing our intelligence to combat money laundering and terrorist finance. So what can Nigeria take away from this agreement, and what must we do on our own part to make this realistic?
Okay, thank you very much. Again, I still say that this engagement is very good for us because we run an open economy and we must continue to engage the external world in our affairs. In fact, one of the things I didn't mention earlier was that this also provided Nigeria and China an opportunity to engage and sign about five memorandum of understandings, in different areas. I think that was spearheaded by the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning. So I am saying that, there will be a lot that can happen as a result of this, and we will continue to push. Industrialization is one. Investment in infrastructure is another. Investment in agriculture is another. Invest systems and, technology transfer is also some of the things that can come as a result of this. So I think that, we will continue to push the various agencies of government that have got the responsibility to do this. We'll continue to push and ensure that we can get more for our people, because at the end of the day, countries will continue to, get involved and sign all manner of agreements. And I think that the task is an implementation to see that we get matched as those, these. And China, we've come a long way. Like I said, if you look at the data that is coming off, off our trade, you find out that we trade the most with China, and therefore we must come up with strategies that make it easier for our traders to trade. We must come up with strategies that will ensure that Chinese people don't come here with their labor and then they ignore our own labor. We must ensure that whatever we are getting from China, whether in form of loans, must also be loans that we can pay back or invest those kind of funding in projects that have got a cash flow that can repay itself back. And also ensure that we don't sign into agreements that will allow the kind of embarrassment that we witnessed and international reputational damage that it can cause to our country. And that when these engagements are done, even at subnational levels, there must be a synchronized way of record that everybody have got an eye over them, so that engagement that they have done or they have entered with the subnational and begin to embarrass, prove transparency, so that countries at this level that we are related, we can see what is it that are loopholes, what are the areas that we're having challenges, and what can be done to improve on them. So a lot will happen, and I believe that what presidents have done and the number of people he has also taken in this kind of engagement will be good. And I believe that sooner than later, we'll also have our envoys out there that will now be following up on the implementation of these MOUs that have been signed. There can never be a shortage of MOUs that will be signed. But I think that the focus must now be to implement them in such a manner that the benefits comes to the country, to the population, to the citizens of the country. And that's obviously what people, what a layman on the road, what a trader wants to get out of this trip, to China that the president has just embarked on.
All right. So, Ambassador, at the moment, Nigeria is currently struggling with food availability and affordability. But if since this 2006 Beijing summit, successive FOCAC conferences have taken specific measures pertinent to strengthening China-Africa agricultural cooperation, mainly reflected in the construction of an agro-technology demonstration center. They also talked about deployment of agro-technology expert groups and training of agricultural technicians for Africa. I mean, out of curiosity, let me ask you, has Nigeria ever benefited from this?
I don't have the data, but I think that, I don't really know what's going on in that agricultural space right now in terms of this technology transfer into the country. But even if we haven't, there will always be opportunities to engage in this, because it's not just agriculture in the traditional way. For us as a country, for us as a people, we must bring in huge technology into our agriculture. What it's called these days is precision agriculture. And that's where the world is headed for us to be food sufficient. I believe that even if we have not benefited from it as a country, we have to do a lot more to ensure that we get this into the country, because China is a leading economy in the world with respect to technology, and whatever it is that they are doing, and of course on this part of the world is also where you have the most arable lands for cultivation. I think some Chinese are even here in Nigeria, and that they're engaged in some farming projects as well. So if they can do that as individuals or as companies that are coming from China, we must be very intentional about our engagement with China. And we must be very resolute and ensure that we get the best out of it. And I believe that this is possible. Where mistakes have been made, they will be amended. And I believe that, all we want is improved coordination. We want to see improved coordination. And we want to see better records. And we want to see things that are clearly, we want to be able to see the things that we intend to achieve. And then, of course, maybe in another 3 years when we come back again to review the situation, we want to be able to see the things that have been done and the achievements in black and white. And I think that that's where we should be looking at as far as this engagement.
Absolutely, Ambassador. And talking about intentionality, I mean, the president has promised foreign direct investment from China. From report that we have, the president taught the Huawei Research Lab and secured a commitment from Huawei to establish a joint solar PV test lab in Nigeria. Another Chinese firm also pledged to establish an assembly plant for electric tricycles and train Nigerians in technology and renewable energy developments. These are huge steps. So for you, what is the significance of these commitments for Nigeria's ICT sector and local manufacturers?
Sometimes when you discuss power in Nigeria, it actually, it evokes some, if you like, you can be annoyed about it. You can question quite a lot of things. But clearly, power is an area that I believe that it's long overdue for us to begin to do a lot of things about. And I think that the president has been very deliberate about this in his diplomacy, shuttle diplomacy, whether from engagement with Saudi Arabia, engagement with Germany, Siemens, and all of these kind of things. So there has been some clear, strategy, to push for investment into the power sector, which can help us. I mean, this is a country where we've got sunlight. This is a country where I believe that we need to do everything possible to harness solar energy into the country. So that being said, I think it's a step in the right direction. That being said, this engagement allows for this kind of partnership that would allow these investments come into the country to help us, to help help power our homes, help power our schools, help power our hospitals, help power our factories, because this is the only thing we can do right now. It will help us create jobs. It will help us ensure that our children study. There's quite a lot that can happen. And I believe that we have the sunlight. All we need to do is to get in the technology to be able to take advantage of this and then make the best out of it. So that's probably, we must give the president credit on this. This investment will have to come in. And by the time of course, commitment is the first part. And we want to see beyond commitment. We want in 3 years' time to look at it and say that these commitments have materialized into the things that are measurable, into the things we can see, into the things that can transform into job creation and improve power supply as a result of these engagements.
Ambassador, let me take you up on the partnership initiative for healthcare, because according to a report from the forum, China will establish an alliance of Chinese and African hospitals, work with African countries to build a number of joint medical centers and traditional medicine centers to enhance cooperation on traditional medicine and smart medicine. The other day I was having a conversation with the Minister of State for Health and Social Welfare, Dr. Olatunji. We got talking about research and policies, and I wanted to know the collaboration between the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development and the Department of Traditional and Complementary Medicine. There are those who strongly believe that you cannot undermine the role traditional medicine play, especially in the area of research. So for you, with this latest commitment, what do you think Nigeria can learn from China in this regard?
I think that China is very advanced in this regard. And what we can do, the beauty of what's going on with technology, I know there's copyright, but again, there's also right to copy. When things have been done rightly, you can actually copy what has been done rightly. So what I believe Nigerians can do, China is far more advanced than Nigeria. Nigeria, we are willing, and we must be open. We must, understudy, see what is it that they've done that have worked for them, that have made them leaders in this area, particularly trying to improve our healthcare system, trying to do a lot of work in our research, research and development as far as vaccines, manufacturing of drugs that can, cater to our local issues here. So that engagement, of course, when I was reeling out the benefits that are likely to come to us on the account of the fact that, we're engaging in this health improvement in our healthcare system is part of the things that I talked about. So clearly, we are, Nigerian governments, the systems that has been established and institutions that are responsible here, we need to work closely, we need to understudy, we need to do whatever it is that they need to do to ensure that they get the benefit out of this. So I'm looking forward to, what we will do on our own part, because we go out, we sign these agreements, we go out, we get these commitments, but again, most importantly, implementation is where the issue lies. So we will look forward to that implementation, and we think personally that engagement should allow for us to understudy China, should allow for us to cooperate with them, should allow for technology transfer, should allow for capacity development and skills transfer to our people, and which will eventually ensure that we get this into Nigeria, number one, get our people employed, number two, be able to manufacture drugs that can cater to our local needs, and of course, even export within the sub-region. So it is, all of this is possible, but again, agreements are agreements. The problem is in implementation, and that's where we look forward to.
Absolutely. Ambassador, another interesting takeaway from that forum is United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres reiterating the call for Africa to have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. He says that it was time to correct historic injustice against the continent. So my question to you now is Africa ready? Did you get that question, Ambassador?
Yes, I think I hear you talking about correction of injustice within the continent.
Absolutely. No, that's the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, saying it was time to correct historic injustice against the continents. So my question is Africa ready with a permanent seat translate into real influence on global issues?
I think that Africa is ready, in my opinion. And I think that, the concerns about injustice and the concerns about not getting a fair treatment is germane and it's valid. And there are, 1,000 examples that you can look at to deal, to analyze these issues. And it's not a time to point fingers, but I think it's a time for improved responsibility. It's a time for leadership within the continent.
So, Ambassador, this particular question is in reference to UN's call for Africa to have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council.
Yes. No, I am saying I'm also supporting the position of UNSG to say that, yes, it is time for Africa to have a seat on the Security Council, and our voices must be heard. And I have no idea what we are waiting for, really. I think the time is now. And these opportunities and engagements have made the time ripe. It's overdue. I'm actually in support, and I'm laying my credence to the fact that the UNSG is pretty much on point as far as that position is concerned.
You hear some analysts say Africa's attempt to have better representation aren't new, but it's different now because current geopolitics have made this current moment quite favorable for them, and there's a competition for Africa's votes. But how will Africa ensure that a permanent seat at this moment leads to substantial outcomes?
It's leadership. It's leadership. It's leadership. The word, it's very clear. It's the responsibility of leaders. And all we need to do is to do our homework very well and then use whatever platform we have to advance the cause of Africa for Africans. So it's leadership, basically. And a lot has happened. If you also look at the Africa Union 2063 agenda, the focus is very clear. And again, I'm not trying to, keep talking about these issues at planning level or at demand stage. These positions must come with responsibilities and measurable impacts. So I am of a view that it is the leadership of Africa that will chart the way forward. Because as we continue to engage, if we get a seat on the Security Council, we must use that position to advance the cause of Africa. 2063, the agenda is very clear. And I believe that every leader within the continent at every level must begin to work together to ensure that we get the best out of every platform that we seek for within the UN level, at even at the regional level as well. Because there's always this quote that charity begins at home. We must start from home to also show that we are ready, and then of course the leaders must also pick up that responsibility and ensure that they represent us very well and that they get the best out of that position and engagement at that level.
Because if you're looking at it from the angle of representation versus influence, the question is, would a permanent seat translate into real influence on global issues, or would it be largely symbolic without meaningful power?
No, it does. It does. Having a seat at the United Nations Security Council, it's important. Some of the major, some of the most, some of the very serious conversations and discussions regarding security issues and all of that at that level are discussed at that, so you cannot have a continent as big, as populous, a huge market like that of Africa, and they are absent at that meeting. It doesn't really show fairness. It doesn't show that we are part of what is going on. It just seems like, people just sit down and take a decision that is expected to be binding on us. So having a seat there actually gives us a voice at that level. So if there are policies and decisions that are coming that are not favorable to us or that we have issues with, we should have a platform that we can voice it. And I believe that that's what that position is. Yes, it's also important for influence. It's very important for influence. It's also, even if you say that, they are just giving us for giving sake. But the point is that a billion people, over a billion people, need to be represented at the United Nations Security Council. And I don't think that we need to, overflog this issue. And I believe that it has come to a point where even the UN Secretary General had to talk about it. And of course, refer to it as injustice. So I believe that, the nature of the continent and the growth we've witnessed within this, within that continent requires that we should be represented at that level. So the call for that is long overdue, and also lending credence to it.
I agree with you, but I'm also wondering, is global perception a challenge? How does the rest of the world perceive Africa's demand for a permanent seat? Africa's calls for inclusion being taken seriously by the existing powers, and what steps can be taken to increase global support for this cause?
It's about engagement. The essence of countries exist not to work together. At the multilateral level, we must continue to engage, and it doesn't even matter how the leaders or some other bigger countries perceive what our demands are. But I believe that, we are a continent, and then we also have other sovereign countries within the continent. That's a huge voice. We're talking about over 50 African countries here, all coming together to say that we want a seat on the UN Security Council. I don't think it's too much to ask for. How many continents have as much countries as Africa? I don't know any continent that have got as much countries as we have here. So this is a huge voice that are not being properly represented. And we are saying that this is, even if it had happened over the years, every injustice must have a day of correction. Issues that have not been addressed in the past, there must come a day when we will look at this issue and see whether, should we continue this way or should we not? So I am of a view that it doesn't matter whatever be the issue in the past, but moving forward, we will continue to advance this course, and we will continue to, press on. And whoever that, we need to engage as African leaders, we will continue to engage and ensure that we get what it's deserving. It's about policy making. You don't make policy for us without us being on the table where you're making the policy. I think it's injustice. And
Ambassador, from your vast knowledge and experience, what are the criteria? What should be the criteria for selection? How will the continent decide which African country will represent the entire region? Should the seat be rotational among African countries, or should a specific country permanently hold the seat?
Well, there are always ways and means that African leaders sit down and sort out these issues. There's a platform at the AU. Other positions that are, that come to the continent, even within the sub-region and within the, within AU, for example, ECOWAS, for example, there are mechanisms that leaders sit down and resolve on, what needs to happen. And I do not think that it's something that a country must hold as a fixed position. But I wouldn't go, a lot into this, because the leaders within the continent will always find ways of resolving these issues. At AU level, they will sit down there and then figure out what is the best solution. But if I have to recommend, it has to be rotational. If Nigeria holds this for some time, it should go to another country. And then that way, we can measure the impact of what has happened when this country was holding the position and what has happened when it gets to another place. And it doesn't make any sense. Don't forget that, this is, a huge continent. And you don't fight. You don't get everybody to come together to fight for a position, and then you cede it to a particular place and say they don't have to hold it in trust for the rest. They will hold it after some time. It should actually be rotated. The rotation should be the issue. But again, this is my personal opinion. The leaders of the continent must sit down when this position comes and find the best way that works, for the continent.
So another big question is, does Africa currently have the institutional capacity and diplomatic resources to play a leadership role on global security matters, particularly in conflict resolution, talk about peacekeeping and international diplomacy?
Yes, I think we do. Let me also say that Africa have got some of the finest diplomats. I've been in this business for a while, and in my sojourn in the diplomatic space, you'll find fine diplomats, across the length and breadth of the country. So I think the resources are not lacking at all. What we're saying basically is that the skills we have is what we have to now put to bear. And don't forget that even at the AU level, a lot has been going on. We've engaged each other on a lot of issues. I mean, what took us to China is also about diplomacy, is also engagement. And we will continue to do that. The country, the continent is properly resourced to be able to take to such responsibility. There's no question about that at all.
All right. So before I let you go, so how does Africa plan to address its own internal conflicts?
A lot has been happening in this space. And incidentally, the chair in AU responsible for peace and conflict resolution, I believe, is even a Nigerian, So a lot has been happening. Lots of engagement has been happening in that space. There are, AU is very clear on that. And it's not just even, about dropping the guns. There are also issue of equity, there are issues of fairness, there are issues that has to do beyond the issue of just the fighting and the killings and all of these issues. Security is a big issue, not just in Nigeria, not just in even the continent. Quite a lot of continents are dealing with security challenges. So when we talk about security, sometimes people look at it and think it's just an African thing. It's everywhere, and I think that AU have got a platform that they've created to deal with this. And at regional levels, ECOWAS the other day have come to say that they need to set up a force, a standby force that will also help us address our security challenges within the sub-region. I believe that those in SADC are also doing the same. The EAC, the East African Community, are also doing theirs as well. So a lot of work is going on, and then AU is also doing a central coordination of what is happening at the various, regional level within the continent. So I think that we are moving in the right direction. But again, as we continue to engage, there will be call for increased capacity. And then, of course, as we continue to engage countries like China, there will also be call for assistance and technology transfer wherever necessary to help us in addressing these issues.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And just like you said, beyond agreements, beyond commitments, we hope we get it right when it comes to implementation. Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador Elajah Onyeagba, former Nigerian ambassador to Burundi. Thank you so much for joining us on Politics Tonight. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so very much, and God bless.
And thanks a lot for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG, and as Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji.